Hello, everybody. Um, so sorry we couldn't get a full week one recap here. I think it might be better in hindsight. Corstian's on your left, I'm on your right. Whenever you talk about week one, it's bound to be overreactions galore.
Hmm.
But there's been a lot of surprises, Corstian. If you told me
Yeah.
Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Darnold would be leading the MVP race after week two, I would have looked at you sideways.
Uh-huh.
It's just unbelievable what they're doing. I'm so happy to be talking about those three um, this week. But any other cool findings? It's not looking good for Bo Nix and the Broncos starting out, but in the same situation as Caleb and the Bears, I feel like they'll get better as the season goes along. Not panicking on their prospects. I didn't suddenly expect either
Mhm.
team to make the playoffs. But um, anything, anything you want to point out just from watching your hometown Broncos?
I'd say, uh, Bo Nix looks like he has improved from weeks 1 to 2. He threw for like 240 some pass yards this last week, which I thought was a nice improvement to see. And then I think just with looking at kind of Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, um, like there's like talent around, but like isn't really showcase themselves to like make it easier for these rookie quarterbacks. Where like you look at the Broncos, where the leading rusher is Bo Nix, and obviously it's hard to, you know, play well as a passer when you really have no established run game to rely on, and you are the established run game.
It's a similar problem with the Bears. Interior offensive line is a big problem, and my worries with having Swift is that you have a very narrow run game you can do with him. He's very good when the gaps are clear and he can use his speed traits. But if he
Mm-hmm.
has to make like multiple zone outside or outside zone running decision making that doesn't rely on just like run into the open hole, like use leverage against defenders that's created by the lines, he struggles with that. And I like
Mm-hmm.
Khalil Herbert better in those spots. So I think the Bears are trying to figure out how to have a competent run game. I wasn't really expecting Caleb Williams to hit 25 rushing yards, but that seems to be the formula creating off the fly right now. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the Bears' offensive struggles can be attributed to one thing, but I think the number one thing is just inexperience.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the overthrows that Caleb has and the timing mishaps, those are to be expected. I'm not looking over like DJ Moore being unhappy with the way things are targeted. I look at it this way: if you were in DJ Moore's shoes, you would want to have like all the catches and opportunities, especially if you beat a guy on the route.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look at it as saying he's done and tired with Caleb because it's week two. I think he was just upset over like he couldn't get that ball because it
Mm-hmm.
was so wide open and stuff like that. And that's happened on occasion. So I think you'd be a better teammate about it. Like Keenan Allen was like visibly coaching Caleb on like what's going through
Mm-hmm.
your receiver's mind on the sideline during the game
Mm-hmm.
he was at. And I'd rather have DJ Moore be an influence like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as Caleb doesn't make it a problem, I don't see
Mm-hmm.
this an issue. And I
Yeah.
think Caleb is one of the few quarterbacks I trust to put in a situation that the Bears are in,
Mm-hmm.
even though their situation is a lot better than Mr. Trubisky and um, Mr. Trubisky and Justin Fields replaced him. I
Mm-hmm.
think the surrounding cast has been a lot better. Now it's just an interior line. So,
Yeah.
some of my findings on the Bears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all I really expect from any of these rookie quarterbacks is like to see visual improvement in their games, as the season goes on. Because I feel like we've been spoiled, I guess, by, the CJ Strouds, Joe Burrows, where, the second they kind of get put in immediately and are already good. And so we have this expectation that highly drafted rookies should be like superstars out of the gate. The chances of that happening are certainly increased with that, but um, you look at like Josh Allen, he took a couple of years before we really saw him hit his stride. Patrick Mahomes sat his entire first year, except for like the last game. Jordan Love, he was behind Aaron Rodgers for a couple seasons, and we're seeing that. Jared Goff, even like Jared Goff's first like year was pretty bad until they got Sean McVay, and then he's kind of able to show out a little bit more, and then he's doing pretty good with Detroit too right now, despite some of the interceptions. But yeah.
You just brought up a topic I want to bring up today as well. Anthony Richardson. We're gonna talk about him, especially after that week 1 game. But a perfect segue into Derek Carr, a guy that people thought they had the book on him and what he's capable of doing, and what he's shown in his tenure with the Saints when they figured out their offensive line problem this season is astounding. I think after week 2, all things are off the table. The Saints offense. This is me claiming that I believe they are a top 3 offensive team this year. If you guys remember last year, Corstian and I had this very informal bet on who would have the most passing yards, Derek Carr or Jared Goff. And at the time, I thought the Saints figured it out. They figured out how to use Shaheed, Olave, and in certain aspects they did. But what really hampered them was one tackle. His name is Trevor Penning. Once they figured this out, they changed their offensive coordinator. So, there's more motion, less stagnant play under Pete Carmichael. The Saints look like an entirely different team. Alvin Kamara, 4 touchdowns. Yes, I get it. But the things they're doing around Olave with Shaheed, what Derek Carr is doing, I hope Taysom Hill is a lot better. I know he went to the hospital with a chest injury, so prayers up for him. But this offense, the sky's the limit because it's not just those who – they have A.T. Perry, and they have guys waiting in the wings that can also contribute. They have Kendrick Miller as well. They have who's the guy from the Lions, Jamal Williams. They are deep on what they have. And if by chance Derek Carr falters, it's a perfect situation for a guy like Spencer Rattler to walk into. I think the Saints are deep. They figured out what was wrong. They figured out the formula this early in the season. And to see the beatdown they placed on the Cowboys was the further validation of being a top 3 offense. Because Cowboys, they were like one of the best defensive teams last season. And the Saints went into their house and said, oh, you were? Well, that was last season. We're here now. So I've been really impressed with watching the Saints so far.
Yeah. And I think a huge part of that, I kind of talked about this earlier, was about bringing in Clint Kubiak. And just we saw just the noticeable change in how the offense functions because more or less the personnel, between last season and this season really hasn't changed. I feel like the narrative last season as well was Alvin Kamara was decently washed. He is hitting that kind of age range where running backs do start to fall off. But obviously, he looks like he's still in his prime basically with how good he was playing this last Sunday. But and then, like you said earlier too, I think they figured out how to use Shaheed as well. The past couple seasons, I've been pretty high on him. Because I was talking a lot about and hyping him up a lot about how he is the guy in this offense that can take the top over the defense. Think there's talk about how Chris Olave should be that guy, he can, but I think Olave, just him being able to, I guess, almost take that Michael Thomas role of being an elite route runner, and then having Shaheed as kind of the overtop deep threat, it's kind of really balanced out this offense as well.
Yeah, and Derek Carr does really well in the middle of the field anyway. So I would like to see what I'm not seeing so far is a clear difference between Foster and Morrell and then Juwan Johnson. Both capable tight ends. I was the brave man who claimed that Foster Morrell could put a top 10 tight end numbers. Well, I think the tight end room is way too stocked now across the NFL to claim that. He is a very talented tight end, so I would like to see them use more pieces on this offense. But what you said about Shaheed is absolutely true. The perception of him, is he's a great best ball guy, but you wouldn't trust him week to week from a fantasy season if you have him on your team. Great guy to bet on, though, to have 70 yards receiving a week because he could easily get it in one snap. I think week 2, what did he have? He had 96 yards, 1 touchdown off 4 receptions. And when you have Kamara, the so-called washed running back, with 20 carries, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns, takes one play, 50-plus yards off the catch for another. You have your 3 elements. You have your deep threat, you have your running back, you have to worry about everyone on the field that's a passing game weapon, mismatch nightmare, and then you have a route running behemoth. What I'm learning this year is those are the only three components you need to have a really good offense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because look at the Lions. Like, Laporta hasn't shown that much, like, in their scheme so far. But they have the route running demon and Amon-Ra. They have the like, be scared of guy anytime he touches the ball in Jameson. And then they have Jahmyr Gibbs, matchup nightmare, in a
Mm-hmm.
functional run game with him and David Montgomery. And they're still able to keep themselves in games because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Chiefs. Before Pacheco got hurt, they had him. They had a speed threat demon and like Xavier Worthy. And Travis Kelce's not been putting up big numbers. But they had Rishi Rice as kind of like the go-to guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's more schemed up for him. He's not winning by route running, except that one play against the Bengals was pretty impressive. That long touchdown he had. Like down the sideline. That is encouraging for Rice. If Rice is doing that, he's a top 10 wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you're seeing it across the league. If you see those three elements, you're gonna have a scary offense. So that's what I'm learning so far as I'm looking for these offenses for the first 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of cool to see kind of the shift, I guess, that you kind of mentioned here with NFL like successful offenses and how kind of these combinations are working. Just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could look throughout like the NFL and kind of see that trend of like the deep threat plus like the route runner. Because even like back with like Tyreek Hill on the Chiefs, like I mean, you could say Travis Kelce was your route runner with Hill as the deep threat. You look back at Andy Reid's stint with the Eagles, where Deshaun Jackson was the deep threat, and you had guys like Jason Avant, Jeremy Maclin, who were, I mean, they could do deep, but they were also like skilled route runners that you kind of have them go over the middle.
Yeah, another team with that same situation, but I think they're better equipped defensively. It's the Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was like really hyped about the Falcons once they got Kirk. And you see what the Saints are doing now in these first 2 seasons. I watched the Buccaneers closely against the Lions, and they just look like a different team than they were a year ago. Despite the offensive coordinator change, despite all the injuries they're facing with Winfield, Vita Vea in the middle of the game, and then who's their defensive end they took? Very promising. Kalijah Kancey.
Mm-hmm.
Missing those three is huge for them right now. And the fact that Levante David is still putting up the stats he's at is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not been his best self at the same time. And plus, they've lost the cornerback, Carlton Davis, to these same Lions. And the fact they were able to like be a more grittier team than the Lions when the game came down to it speaks volumes about their potential season. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Bucs, and the thing I highlighted first before describing everything else is they have their guy Evans, Godwin. They do it a little bit differently. Where like Godwin's kind of like your route running savant, Evans is kind of like your deep threat, and then Rashad White has made significant strides in his running game. He's proven me wrong. I'm so happy to have Godwin on my teams because he's a classic wide receiver that people just like undervalued because like he's not the next best thing, but he's still a guy capable of 8 or 9 receptions a game.
Yeah,
like he went off in the first. He wasn't targeted that much in the second half, but like the long touchdown, the separation, like he and Baker were on the same page last. That was a big concern. People were concerned about Mike Evans and Baker having a connection, but Godwin really not getting targeted as much. I think you could chalk that up to injury. Now that it's a year past his ACL, dude looks good, man. And then you look at the Bucs run defense without Vita Vea, like one of the monsters you don't want to run against, which is where he single-handedly shuts down running games. Like they made Detroit work. Like they give a lot of yards. If you look at the yards, like Detroit's going to put up a lot of numbers as far as yards. But once they got to the red zone, they held firm. They had like 3 field goals allowed and not a touchdown. That was it. And I think that was on a long touchdown to Jameson. I could be wrong on that. But Bucs look good on both sides of the ball. I think Todd Bowles is figured it out.
Yeah. And then I've been a big fan of Baker Mayfield. I think it was like his last season with the Browns, where I think it ended up coming out that he was playing with an injury, and that's why it turned out he was playing so bad. But they dump him, and then I think we saw what he could do with that like couple games that he played for the Rams like 3 years ago, where that was like that one game against the Raiders where they just got him. He didn't really have time to learn the playbook, and he like orchestrates a game-winning drive. Uh, and I think it was kind of like a moment like that where I was like, Baker may still have it. And so then he comes into the Bucs, and then there's the question marks. Like, was it kind of just a fluke with the Rams, or is he going to go back to, I guess, being bad? Which I never really thought he was ever bad, but he did well there. And then I think just keeping the core of good players has really benefited the Bucs here, where like there's worries about Mike Evans leaving in the offseason, but they're able to retain him. And Antoine Winfield, like there was worries about him leaving in the offseason, but they were able to secure all these key players back to the team. And so even though there's coordinator changes, and I think it didn't really negatively affect them either way, but they were able to work it through. And because of that strong core that they got here, I'm interested to see how Rachaad White plays throughout the rest of the year, because the first 2 games he hasn't really played well as the leading rusher. He's still elite as a pass catcher, but Bucky Irving, I know fans were pretty excited about him coming in. He played well in the preseason, and he played better on less handoff or running back touches outside of passing than Rachaad White this last week. And so we could see more touches from Bucky Irving. And, if he is able to better establish the run game while Rachaad White still is playing a lead out of the backfield, I think this Bucs offense could be even scarier than what we saw last season and these first 2 weeks.
Yeah. When I talk about Rachaad White, I'm just talking about his decision making as an inside the tackles guy. So it might not show up in the stat sheets, but he's not stretching out a play where it's it could be -5 yards if you go against disciplined defense. Or in the best case scenario, you outrun a guy who's slower than you on the outside. He's been a lot better, the decision making on when to take the 3 or 4 yard chucks. As a result, it's making him less of an efficient runner than Irving. I saw a little bit of Irving. I like what I see so far. I want to see what he does with more touches. So I think the Bucs have a strategy out good where it's if you do a split situation with Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, you might get the best of both, because Rachaad White doesn't require 12 touches to all become get in the rhythm and then command a 20 carry guy like Derrick Henry or Josh Jacobs might. But looking at Bucky Irving, he is definitely efficient as a runner. I do want to see how he does the little things well, because pass protection with this team is gonna be key. I think I was texting you this. The one problem the Bucs have is pass protection on their right tackle, and White wasn't chipping well. Bucky Irving wasn't chipping well. They need to get a guy that can be able to overcome that, because Aiden Hutchinson is not going to be the only guy. But I think he had 4.5 sacks in the entire game, and he had 3 of them in the first quarter. He almost took over the game and gave Detroit a chance to win. So it's if on the Bucs, that's something that's not going to change, whether you're going up against San Francisco, Philadelphia, Green Bay, Detroit, Falcons, that's not going to change at all. Even the Saints, you gotta get that figured out in the right tackle spot. One thing I want to go back to with Baker Mayfield, I think the one difference I see with him is earlier in his career, he would run away from pressure at the first sign of it. Now he's doing what Justin Herbert said his rookie season. Big difference. If you step up in the pocket, it's a lot more efficient movement and as a pocket manager, and you're inviting less stress than if you were to just divide out of the pocket quickly. Kyler had a good game last week, but one of the problems in week 1 is sometimes he leaves the pocket too early. And Baker used to do that same exact thing. he's not doing that anymore. He's trusting when he steps in the pocket, he'll be able to find somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And his recognition of doing that over the last 2 seasons is the best way I can see why he's putting up the stats he is. I think he's figured it out as a quarterback. And he's not going to be the most mobile guy you play, but he's no longer going to make like the game-defining mistakes in multitudes that we saw with him. So I've been really impressed with Baker. I think he's figured it out, like who he is as a quarterback, and like understood like, oh, I'm not like a game changer like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, but I know myself. I know my strengths. I'm aware of my weaknesses and sought corrections out. That's what you want out of a pro. He's a pro's pro. And just listening to the impact he had on a Los Angeles team that given up before he arrived and the impact he's had on the Bucs is just incredible leadership. Like, you're like, if Baker was like this on the Browns, it literally might not matter that Kitchens was the coach then. They could have been a lot better than the team they were. So, really happy for Baker Mayfield on that front.
Yeah, and he just like seems like a great teammate to have. Like super high energy, but he's also like he seems really hardworking and whatnot. But did you also see that interview bit at I think it's post game where they were talking about his like 11-yard touchdown run was like the longest rushing touchdown of his career or something, and he was like, "Oh, that's kind of embarrassing. I gotta get better," or something. But it was kind of funny.
But at the same time, like he's not afraid. Like obviously, I'm worried about him like the same way I would worry about Tua running like that. But like he's a gritty guy. He's a gritty guy. Like he brings that element to this team, and yeah, I think way too many people wrote off the Bucs just purely because of off-season hype. They're a classic team that they didn't do anything flashy, but the things they did do this offseason give them a chance to make a deep run in the playoffs. Okay. Another team that looks like they're going to be a new division winner unless Detroit steps it up. Minnesota. Like a lot of negative stuff happened to them at the very beginning of the season. We thought that all hopes were lost when JJ McCarthy got hurt. What Sam Darnold is proving is like he might be the missing piece that Minnesota needed. I didn't watch too much of this game. I saw the 97-yard throw. That's just an incredible throw with great touch and timing. Like he's a guy that looks like he was rebuilt right now. And maybe part of it was observing Brock Purdy. And maybe part of it was Kevin O'Connell, like putting him in only ideal situations. But I'll look at him and a combination of what Van Ginkel has brought on the defensive side and what Flores has continued to transform this defense to be. The Vikings are a very fun team to watch, just as a football fan. As a Bears fan, I hate it because now it's like we might finish worse in the division just because of the rookie toll it's going to take on Caleb. We'll see what happens with Green Bay, but like Minnesota is going to be a tough out for anyone in that division. Like head to head, like they can nail one on Detroit. Like I'm no longer thinking Detroit can sweep them this season purely based on talent. Like Sam Darnold looks legit.
Yeah, and then it's like I was a believer that like Minnesota's system was a system that like is able to get the ball to their playmakers. And so like last week, we saw Aaron Jones just like pretty much ball out. He felt unstoppable. Granted, I think it was against the Giants, so it was whatever. But then like you look at this week against the 49ers, like it was only 4 catches for Justin Jefferson, but that being like 133 yards, granted that was like the 90-yard catch. Like Minnesota just found ways to get the ball to like the guys that are hot pretty much, because you even see like with Ty Chandler where he led the team with rushing yards this game too, where it's like they're just able to feed the hot hand. And so I felt like I don't think they were going to be this scary. I don't think anybody expected this from the Vikings this year, but I felt like from what we saw last season with just Kirk Cousins being hurt, I felt confident that the coaching staff was good enough to at least get the ball to the right guys. And then we see it here in the first 2 weeks where they upset the 49ers. I think everybody, maybe except Vikings fans, had the 49ers pretty much easily beating this team. And then you even look at how like the 49ers offense played, and like Brock Purdy didn't play awful, like sure he had 1 interception, 1 touchdown, but he still had 319 pass yards. Jordan Mason played a good game, and then like they're getting the ball to their playmakers too. Deebo Samuel 100 plus receiving yards, George Kittle 76 receiving yards and a touchdown. Like, they even on the defensive side, it's like four sacks and an interception. Like they did good, but just like the Vikings, I guess, just were able to outperform. And it was just kind of like a battle of coaching, it seemed.
I think it's the coaching battle that won.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's Kyle Shanahan against every other coach is probably like a mismatch, even against the Chiefs. But for whatever reason, the coaches on like Minnesota's side know how to get after San Francisco, and they have the personnel to do it now. And it's just, I think that combination really won them this game. Like, granted, not having like Ayuk show up and like dealing with like the injuries you are to McCaffrey, and I think Debo got hurt too, right?
Yeah, I think so. So many injuries, it's crazy.
Yeah, they're for a team that was just in the Super Bowl to have that happen is just unfortunate. That's just unfortunate. Like it's lots of teams don't make it for the Super Bowl for a variety of reasons, but like to have that be the reason that like you're not starting out the greatest is pretty bad. Like that's unfortunate. So we hope those guys get right. As a McCaffrey owner in one league, I sure as hope he's right. Because right now, Corstian's holding on to my handcuff. He was rightfully mine, and Corstian took him from me. So I got to figure out a way to build my lineup off of that. But with the 49ers, like they're just, for whatever reason, the Vikings are just a bad matchup for them. Like their one weakness in defense is probably their cornerbacks because they don't have like a go-to shutdown corner. So Jefferson's going to be a mismatch for anybody, but especially them. And the Vikings are one of the few teams that have a solid O-line throughout like their tackles. So like Nick Bosa is not as dominant against like their tackles compared to other teams. So it's like it's just a difficult matchup. But I think what's impressing me more too is I really like the emergence of Jalen Naylor. I think he can be a significant contributor. I want to see what this team looks like without Jefferson because now we're in an interesting science experiment. Is Sam Darnold still a productive member on the Vikings as starting quarterback without Jefferson? I'm not saying he's going to have the same numbers without Jefferson. Based on what I've seen, the way he's throwing the ball and the way he's setting up himself, he seemed to have rebuilt himself compared to what we know him on the Jets. So I'm optimistic he can be a significant starter. Maybe not have the highs that he did with Justin Jefferson on the field. But I still think he can support a team lacking Hawkinson, Jefferson, maybe Addison for an extended long time in this McConnell scheme. I think they figured out the best way to use him. Alrighty. You all good here?
Yeah, I'm all good.
Okay, sweet. Alrighty. So there's two players I want to talk about that I really, really liked. One of them was pretty inconsistent, so it's kind of like a wait and see approach. But J.K. Dobbins, he's back, guys. He is 100% back. One of the issues with just valuing him during the season, how is he going to come back from the Achilles? That's like, you don't know. You don't know. And it was just based on his comments where he's like, I feel good coming out of rehab. But it's like the first time he came out, like he tore his ACL. And like the season after, he rushed it. So he was like, oh, is he just rushing off from Achilles? Because it normally takes a full year. The guy looks explosive. Like some of the breakaway runs that should be touchdowns, he's not necessarily getting. It kind of sucks. But he's still ripping off like 50, 60-yard games. This guy looks absolutely incredible. And I'm just happy I have him in multiple leagues for redraft and picked him up where I did because he was an absolute steal. Like people didn't know whether it would be Edwards or Dobbins, so that's why they were kind of like in the same area. But like Dobbins is the clear he's the clear lead back because he has the Saquon Barkley level explosiveness you want out of him. even with all the injuries he's had.
Mm-hmm.
Gus Edwards is kind of like the safer play.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the scheme he's played in before, the Greg Roman scheme. And what the Chargers have done with the rebuild offensive line and a quarterback threat that they do have in Justin Herbert.
Mm-hmm.
I think all those factors, like he could have a top 5 running back season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this lightly because of all these factors in play.
Mm-hmm.
Guy looks like he's back. He looks like the type of prospect I would dare say is equally as good as Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Like he looked that special these first 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I feel like most people like never really doubted the actual talent that he had. Like, I mean, that's why people kept on drafting him in fantasy leagues year after year despite the injuries. And I think the concern this last season was just like the quality of his injury that he had, which I think scared off a lot of people, including myself, because I just didn't know like how ready he'd be by week 1. Because I know there was talks that like he could potentially miss this entire season. And obviously, you know, when you're hearing that in regards to a running back injury, like that's not very positive for just the long-term longevity of
That's
somebody's
fair.
career.
The injury concerns are absolutely fair.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking just as far as like price. I mean, if he's going for the 11th to 12th round, how much better is like your 4th running back compared to J.K. Dobbins? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think you also have to look at that too. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you do have IR spots in leagues, like
Mm-hmm.
take a chance on Dobbins, take a chance on Chubb, see what you're gonna get when they come back.
Mm-hmm.
Chubb is a little bit more riskier, given that he's had like a multiple ligament knee injury
Mm-hmm.
multiple times now. But with
Mm-hmm.
Dobbins, it's like this is something you can come back for. We've seen players do, like Cam Akers did for sure. It's just a matter of what he looks like. So I don't blame you for taking him deep. I'm just saying, as far as the talent level, I don't think the talent went anywhere.
Yeah.
He's in a good spot. He's been like, how often does he go? Like when you go to a new spot, you're gonna have the same coordinator there. Like
that's kind of funny.
That's it. Certainly makes it an ideal situation, especially when you know like what plays your star player can run, but like you don't want to necessarily like expose him to the plays that he can run, but he has to be like 100% athletically healthy to do so. The burning question is, can he stay healthy? Can he remain healthy? That's the big question. I have confidence that he can. I think he knows his body a lot better coming from these 2 surgeries, but it's always a sad reality that might come true. Another player, and this is like a debated player, so I just want to preface that. We've talked about him a little bit earlier. Anthony Richardson. I believe in the talent of this player. Keeping in mind, he's still technically playing his rookie season because he's played 4 games during his actual rookie season before he got hurt his shoulder. This is a guy who's figuring out his superstar capabilities. You look at the throw that he absolutely should not have thrown to Pierce in double coverage, like when it's like too deep. And he's probably one of a few quarterbacks that can get the ball with the velocity and speed that he did on that 65-yard touchdown against the Texans. But, I mean, one of the few plays that will rival that, and I mentioned this before, is him staring down the barrel of Aaron Donald, like literally 2 feet away from like crushing a soul and nailing a boundary pass 30 yards down the field. Like, how many quarterbacks do you think are going to do that? Like, Geno Smith, if he does it, we know how he's going to react. He's going to scream and be like, what the hell? And throw that ball away. Like, what this kid is doing, I mean, he's exceeded my expectations, like, as far as, like, the talent level he's had. Now, like, close run defense, that's a problem. That's a big, big problem. And some of the turnovers that I've seen out of the Green Bay game, not ideal for sure, but I think he's the type of player that can bounce back because his highs are like with the best of the league. And I think with the Steichen scheme and the running game he has with Jonathan Taylor and that old offensive line, he'll figure out like how to cut back on those backbreaking turnovers. And once he does, could be the season 2. MVP is not off the table for him. It really isn't. because of the
Yeah.
type, because we've seen what he's capable of against the Texans. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in him. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
happy he was able to figure it out week one. Now it's just, can you get that to consistently happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think with Anthony Richardson, it's like, I mean, what we're seeing out of him right now is kind of what we saw out of him in college, where he really excels at the deep ball, but his like struggles do mostly lie within his short to intermediate passing, which I think is, I mean, like week one, we saw like the benefits of his like strong arm. Like I think he probably does have one of the best deep balls in the league. You could argue that I think right now, um, and that's what led them to being as scary as they were week one. But then you see week two where again he had like a couple good deep passes, but then it was just that short to intermediate range where he continued to struggle. That was kind of my main concern with him coming out of college. And I mean, obviously that's something he can improve in. It's kind of stressful, I feel like, for Colts fans when you got a young quarterback who struggles with the shorter passes, the methodically driving up the field. And like it's valid concerns, but um, I mean, like you said, he has very high potential just because of his physical capabilities, both with the deep ball and his rushing ability. But yeah, it all just comes down to his development. Me personally, I think he's still a pretty raw prospect. Just with his, I'd say, weaker short pass game, but um, yeah, I think this will just like I think a lot of Colts fans were thinking like, oh well, we did this well with Gardner Minshew, like just wait for Richardson to come back, and like I think Richardson can be the reason why they win a couple of games this season just because of his own ability. But then also I think there will still be a lot of growing pains with him that may take like another year and a half to kind of work itself out, and hopefully he is able to overcome some of those issues he's got.
Yeah. I mean, I'll throw a couple stats out here because it's a problem. He faced a problem that he had in Florida a lot, and it was
Mm-hmm.
drops. I think
Mm-hmm.
50% of his throws were dropped. It led all the quarterbacks in week two.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that, like if you adjust the completion percentage accordingly, um, it was like the second worst among week two passers because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his average time to throw was the second highest as well, but 3.2. So he's buying a lot of time, but he's not able to get the big plays itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I did like is like the pressure rating he faced. So like the
Mm-hmm.
9.1 pressure to sack rate was the fourth best mark. And what that means is that's kind of comparing like how much does pressures get converted to sacks.
Mm-hmm.
And what that tells me is he's a guy who's capable of avoiding sacks. And in football, you want to avoid going backwards as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
fact he's able to avoid that, and it's just literally just the turnovers and the drops that are killing him,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that's correctable because those are just like, don't make that decision. Don't make
Mm-hmm.
this decision. Like receivers, correct your technique when you're catching the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Understand positioning and do what Amon Ra did when Jared Goff was about to throw a surefire interception. Be smart. If you know you're not going to catch it, don't put the defense in a position where they can catch it.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are stuff that are going to learn. Now, I think I do agree with you. The one downside is I think he needs to stop playing hero ball so much and learn to game manage a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the intermediate throws for me. I kind of categorize that as like 5 to 10 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to get those more consistently. So
Mm-hmm.
if we can channel his velocity in deep throws and like kind of like control it better on the intermediate throws,
Mm-hmm.
which is another skill I think that's learnable. I think the sky's the limit for him. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of it just comes down to like getting better with his touch on the ball because like I
yeah,
think he is one of those types of
absolutely.
quarterbacks that just like rockets the ball to his receivers, which is good for those tight windows. But then like receiver open, expecting kind of just like a quick catch and go when they get the ball bulleted to them, it can lead to some of those incompletions. But I think just with better touch on the ball, um, alone, I think can just improve his completion rate over on those intermediate throws. And then from there, he can continue just to up his accuracy. and just being able to like read the defense, which I think will be that next stage in just increasing that completion rate to being a successful quarterback.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. Like I think he's in a Matthew Stafford situation as far as like where he's at with his career. But he's notorious for throwing the ball as hard as he can at his receivers. Okay, that's it for me. I'm really excited to see how Richardson and Caleb Williams fare when they square off against each other in week 2. What's your upset alert watch for week 2?
By what again?
What's your upset alert watch? Like, which game are you watching and think is most likely to have an upset?
Oh, in week 3?
Sorry, I meant week 3. Sorry.
Yeah, I gotta check the week 3 matchups real quick. You can go first just quickly while I look at who's playing week 3.
Yeah, so as I'm looking through this, you got the Patriots and the Jets, you got the Giants and the Browns, you got the Bears and the Colts, Houston and Minnesota, Philadelphia and New Orleans. I feel like I'm cheating if I pick the Vikings here. So I'm gonna go in a different direction, and I'm gonna say, based on talent and what I think the team is capable of, I'm gonna say Atlanta beats KC. I think they're gonna make a statement on Sunday night and improve the talent at their level is really good. You have to think about the safeties playing deep and what Mahomes struggles with. I know he struggled against Cincinnati. They have the guys to bring pressure on the left side of the line. So I think teams have found out, oh, wait, this rookie on the left side is really bad for KC. But they also have Justin Simmons and they have Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. I'm very, very confident in what I see in that secondary and the talent Atlanta has on the opposite side. And especially going without Pacheco, that's just going to be hard. It's a lot to ask Carson Steele to but Casey's not going to have as effective as a run game because Carson Steele's looked good in minimal touches. You have no idea what to expect on 15 to 20 touches. So it's I'm going to pick Atlanta here.
Okay, I think that's a cool choice. I feel like this is a really weird week where I don't know, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of games where I'm like, oh, this is going to be super one-sided. I feel like Washington...
There's a lot of evenly matched teams. I agree.
Yeah. So I was potentially the Giants could upset Cleveland. I think that Cleveland is still struggling to figure out what they're doing on offense. And so Giants, if the Giants offense with Malik Neighbors, if he can just have a good quarter of football and they scored 2 touchdowns and then a couple field goals the rest of the game, I think it's very reasonable to think that they could beat the Cleveland Browns, just because of how stagnant Cleveland's offense has appeared to be. Again, it's an upset, so that's a potential one, I think.
I don't have very much confidence in the Giants. You're a brave man for doing that. But I mean, if you lose to a team where you score touchdowns, you lead in time of possession, and you lead in yardage, and you lose without giving up a touchdown, I don't even know what you do with yourself. That's just the Giants and the Carolina Panthers are in bad spots this year. Really, really bad spots. So I mean, Carolina could be one with Andy Dalton starting now. So, but I wouldn't really count that matchup with the Raiders as really an upset. They looked impressive against Baltimore. Don't get me wrong, but it's just, yeah, it's a weird week to have that happen. But interesting choice. We'll see how things turn out. But yeah, let us know. Let us know what you caught in the first 2 weeks. If you forgot to mention something, get on our case. You can follow us on our channel at amon.a.mission on Instagram. Amon a Mission, 3 words, is our YouTube channel name. We'll see a lot more updates. We're really excited to navigate through the season and see how things turn out. Hopefully with better rookie quarterback play, Corstian on both teams. But we'll see you later. See you next week, guys.
Yeah. Peace.
Peace, guys.